Well, good morning. We're talking pizzas, people, and technology. And what a delicious treat it is to sit down with the president of Pizza Hut International, Vipul Chawla, who is in Dallas. Good morning to you, Vipul.
Well, good morning to you, Kate. Thank you. I'm humbled and honored to be part of this program, which I know is super exciting. I wish we were actually sitting across the table and in person in one of these beautiful conference, rooms in Singapore. But technology is bringing us together, so it's great to be here virtually.
I know one day we will enjoy a slice of pizza together in the same country at the same table. We can look forward to that. But Vipul, I would love to ask you, what's one word you would use to describe 2020?
Humbling.
Yes, really. It's been a time to sit back, think, rethink everything that we've done. And I imagine it's been an enormous learning curve for even leaders in the industry, such as yourself.
It has been, we have seen such a transformation of the casual dining industry, the food services industry, uh, not just in the last 12 months, of course, COVID has accelerated so many trends, but we have seen such a movement from casual dining to delivery, from what we call on premise to off premise, from analog to digital, that the world is quite different today than where it was just as recently as 12 months ago. I remember living in Singapore for a long time. It one of our favorite pastimes in Singapore, as for most Singaporeans, and I'm a humble Singaporean myself, was to go and eat out. So go to the food courts and go to the kopitiams and the roti pratas and so on and so forth. And that entire experience of going out, being served, interacting with people, enjoying the food, and coming back was part of our life. And we moved to the US, to Dallas, a few years ago. That was the same. Dallas is a massive, eating out kind of place. Although I will say to you that Singapore food is better, but let's just keep that among ourselves.
I,
But
I
eating
agree.
out was such a natural thing, and now we still enjoy the same food, but it is off premise. Either we drive in our car and we bring it home, or we have it delivered through aggregators. And restaurants and the food services industries who do not have a digital storefront are not keeping pace. Life has changed so significantly in as recently as 12 months. These trends were already there, but they've got accelerated.
They really have. And this is a virus that does not respect or pay any attention to international business. And when did you realize just how serious it was?
We because we have a global business, we had a fairly early line of sight on how serious this was because we had the early warnings from our businesses in Asia. And as you might recall, very rapidly, the news that was coming out of Asian markets was telling us that this is not SARS, because we've all seen, many of us have seen that. This is different. This is far more aggressive. And so it was sometime around this time last year that we had started to see the early impact, the first month of the impact of this virus in our businesses in Asia. And then the speed with which it traveled across the planet, Middle East, Europe, United States, Latin America, and even beyond, happened in a matter of months. So, sometime between February and April of last year, we saw a fairly rapid spread and impact of this across all of our businesses in the world. Travel borders shut down. Many countries shut their airports. So we could see even the impact to our own selves. Many of our colleagues and friends and families got stuck in places and then could not come out or go back in. So we saw that just 12 months ago.
Yes, I mean, the whole world went into a lockdown. It was a wave, as you say, moving from east to west. We lived in our pajamas, our hair grew, we watched every series on Netflix, and it was human behavior that changed so much, Vipul. So, from your perspective, tell us a little bit about how that behavior changed your business.
Yes, thank you. The first things that we see when we run, consumer brands or any brand for that matter, is to, kind of look in the mirror and see how customers and consumers are reacting. And we saw a number of changes. And in some ways, I'll use this slide as a bit of an aid memoir to capture some of the more, shall I say, punctuational changes that we saw across the world. Because we saw some gradual changes and we saw some one time, what we call punctuational changes happening. And the first thing that we saw was at a time of crisis, most consumers react with panic and shock. And before they get used to what that normal is, they start responding in certain ways. What we saw in our business, in our category, and I'll give you a little 101 on pizzas if you don't mind. But the most significant drivers of choice in our category for pizzas is taste and speed. I have yet to meet a hot pizza I haven't liked. So taste and speed are the two key drivers of choice, not surprisingly. But what we saw during the course of the pandemic was that safety, trust, hygienic practices, how the team members were coming across. Were they masked? Did they have gloves? Or were they sanitizing? Were they making sure that the physical storefront was hygienic, etc.? Were aspects that suddenly got dialed up quite significantly. And what we saw, therefore, was a bit of an acceleration of what we call underutilized behaviors. Trust is something which is always there within us forever. But we suddenly saw trust rising to the top as one of the most significant drivers of choice. And of course, it is people and trust and culture that goes together. So the first thing that we saw was that. The second we saw was that customers wanted to flock to the familiar. In our businesses, again, we saw them going back to our core products. So for example, the Hawaiian pizza, which is so popular in Asia, the pan pizza, which is so popular in Asia, the pepperoni top pizza, which is so popular in the western parts of the world, and so on. So we saw a simplification of our menus because customers were flocking to the familiar. The third, and not surprising, we saw the rise of the homebody. Casual dining is consumed to a large extent off premise. And therefore, not surprisingly, we had a significant off premise business. But like you and I are now taking this call from our respective homes at different corners of the planet, you know that we saw even in the case of food, there was a rise of the homebody. What did that mean? It meant that bundled meals, box meals, larger group meals, meals as a means of celebration, as a way of spending time with our families and loved ones, became very significant, and therefore that had an impact on our business model. And the fourth, of course, we saw was the rise of the frugal majority. There is some statistic to suggest that 61% of the world's population had some sort of economic impact or the other, whether it was to their jobs, to their compensation, to their expectation of their future earnings, to the compensation of a loved one or a family member, and the importance of value. And this pricing became very, very critical. All of this certainly had an impact on our business, and we felt that businesses that were able to respond more quickly to these changes were the ones that would come through. In our business, we saw, for example, a significant change from casual dining to delivery. We saw a significant change from the physical storefront to the digital storefront. We saw a significant change from analog to digital in the way customers wanted to interact with us. So those are the trends we saw panning out. And the interesting thing, Kate, is that this wasn't just a developed market trend. This was happening across the world, whether it was in Asia, Middle East, Europe, the Americas, whether it was developed markets, emerging markets. These trends were fairly democratic across the world.
And that is interesting that you say that, Vipul, because normally these trends would take place over the course of 3 to 5 years. We were seeing this rapid acceleration to a different type of human behavior. And what was it like specifically in Asia? What was the big difference that you saw?
I think the first thing was that because this came to Asia before it came anywhere else, of course, Asia reacted with surprise. However, what we also saw was Asia reacted with tremendous resilience, which is a very Asian trait. I think the other thing we must remember is that some of us who've been around for a bit have gone through SARS. And so just getting people back to dialing up the elements of hygiene, like for example wearing masks, which is such a common thing to do in Asia. If you are suffering from any form of respiratory condition, it is just common to see people traveling in trains in Singapore, or in Hong Kong or in Japan wearing masks. So therefore, for our team members to be retrained on some of these aspects was relatively easy because we had some of these processes in our place. And what we also saw was the Asian consumers and the Asian society responded with a lot of oneness. There weren't too many debates on why it was important to wear masks or why it was important for us to make sure that there was a set of hygienic practices and trust, etc., whether it was our team members or our customers. And I think partly because Asia tends to be very resilient, partly because I think Asia had been through some version of this in the past, and therefore there was some memory of it, and therefore nobody wanted to kind of take it lightly. And it therefore happened very quickly, the response to the situation.
Yes, you make such a good point there. I mean, never did we think it would be so controversial, the idea of simply wearing a mask, as it has been in some parts of the world. Yet here in Asia, I'm in Singapore. You've lived in Singapore, of course, now based in Dallas. It's a quite a different story. But Vipul, the Pizza Hut, as I knew it when I was growing up, I would love coming to Pizza Hut with my parents and having a meal. You went through into the shop, you went into the restaurant, and obviously people were stuck at home, they weren't going anywhere. So what happened to all of your stores? How many of those do you have around the world?
Well, we have about 17,500 stores around the world, of which
My
11,000 are outside
goodness
the
me.
US.
And they all of a sudden, I mean, the traffic going through those front doors plummeted.
Yes, because we had to shut the dining rooms across the world. In so many parts of the world, we had either restricted trading, or we had trade zones that were shut, or you couldn't, keep the dining rooms open for a certain time of the day, etc., etc. So we saw a rapid move from our dining room, or what we call internally the on-premise business, to off-premise. Now, I think the good news is that we had been preparing for this for a long time because we had started to see, even before last year, underlying consumer trends which were showing that consumers want to be able to consume our brand pizzas and casual dining off premise, on the go, in their vehicles, take it home, order it home, etc. And therefore, the entire aspect of being ready for delivery and for digital was something we've been working on for quite a few years. So we were kind of prepared for it, and therefore we just had to dial up and accelerate some of the actions we'd already started taking.
Yes. Is this shift, and you talk about these trends, and we're moving in that direction. We're moving into a cashless, cardless world. I read with great interest that 65% of the world's e-commerce spend is in Asia Pacific. So I'm certainly in the right part of the world. And adopting that, as you have said over the last 20 minutes of us having this conversation, has been a lot more seamless here in Asia. Is it here to stay, or will we go back in a few years' time?
No, I think this is, I talked earlier today of, what are called, graduational changes and, and punctuational changes. So, a gradual change is a bit like a curve, a punctuational change is a bit like a step ladder. And I think what we have seen in terms of, let's say, cashless payments, and I'm going to talk about the concept of, contactless and frictionless in a minute. But we have clearly seen some of these changes are here to stay. I don't think there's going to be a going back to. And once you get used to cashless payments and all the ease that it brings, why would you go back to any other form of physical payment? It's just human behavior.
Yes, yeah. Comfort food became a winner, didn't it? And it was interesting that you talk about how the consumer went back to what they know well, what was comfortable to them. The Hawaiian pizza ruled in Asia.
Exactly.
That's good. It's one of my favourites. What was it like though, having to deal with your competitors? How mindful were you? You are the largest pizza chain in the world, but how mindful of you were you of what the competitors were doing and staying ahead of the game in a pandemic?
Yeah, I think we kept ourselves very focused on what we are good at and very focused on what consumer changes we were seeing, and very quickly and with agility adapting to those changes. In my humble opinion, there were a number of players across the world who would have adapted to these with speed, and there were some who wouldn't have. We did not spend a lot of time trying to study others, except for the fact that you want to respectfully understand what competition is doing and learn from them. And I'm humble about the fact that there are often times where we can learn from others and our competitors too. But we were very focused on what it is that we could do to serve our customers through pizzas, people, and technology. And we kept pretty focused on that. It was also an unusual year in terms of how we were working. And there was only so much burden we could place on ourselves and on our teams. And we therefore wanted to just focus on what we're good at and make this work for our customers.
Yeah. The focus that you mentioned on teams, on your own staff, of which there are thousands, how did you reassure them during these very rocky times that we're going to be okay here?
Yeah, so in Yum, Pizza Hut is a part of Yum Brands. We have this internal, sort of little clarion call which says that we look after our team members, which is our staff. They look after our customers, and the business takes care of itself. So, following that principle, when the pandemic happened, the first thing that we did was took a very quick assessment of the safety and hygiene and hygienic standards and conditions within which our team members were operating. That's the first thing that we did. So we think, world class, global best practices on hygiene. You should expect no less from us, of course, as a global brand. But within the pandemic, some of that had to be heightened. So, for example, masks around the world, PPE kits for our teams, visors where necessary, shields where required, dialing up of the entire hygienic practices, and training our team members on things like contactless delivery, etc., which made it safe for the customers, but also made it safe for our team members. So we did a whole lot of that, and outside of that, we took a lot of care when team members had been affected or their families had been affected by the pandemic, whether it was through for health reasons or for economic reasons. Because as I said, in our belief, we look after our team members, they look after the customers, the business looks after itself, and we know that the customer experience will never exceed that of a team member. So if the team member is known to feel that he or she operates under a certain condition which is hygienic and clean and trusted and so on, that same feeling will be transmitted onto our customer. So the customer experience will never exceed that of a team member.
Okay, that's a very interesting point that you make there. The team members. I mean, it was such a worrying time for so many people, as you say, losing jobs. You mentioned a few moments ago, 61% of the workforce were under threat financially of their jobs or people within their own families and communities. So difficult as a leader. But you have, managed Fortune 500 companies over the last 30 years. How much was that experience? Did that help you? Because you must have been nervous yourself, being thrown into a once in a generation pandemic of, what am I doing? I'm all of a sudden at home. I'm running a huge business. I'm nervous. How am I going to, keep my team on track that we can still continue to deliver a world class brand?
So thank you for that question. And I think, in all honesty, Kate, I would say I'm still learning, as many of us are, because we've all lived through, financial crises. We've lived through, weather patterns that have been unusual, earthquakes, tsunamis, and so on. We've lived through some form of SARS and other, diseases that have happened. But I don't think any one of us has lived through this. So I don't think anything prepared us for this. But what we did do to get through it, and I think we're still getting through it, is to firstly stay really focused, believe in our teams and ourselves, dive into our resilience, and tap into our culture. And we felt that as we did that, that helped us get through the circumstances and the situation in how we respond to business. And I think we're still learning, but those are some of the things that I certainly experienced in the last year or so.
Yeah. You mentioned on this slide, Vipul, point two, you were agile, and that was crucial. Yeah, it couldn't continue as business as usual. So, can you give us some examples of how agile you were and what you did?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, you talked about like when did we first discover that there was an issue coming which was going to travel across the world, and we discovered it in like February of last year when we started getting the news out of Asia. We also found that a few weeks into this, our businesses in China and other parts of Asia had come up with an innovation, and that innovation was called contactless delivery. So we said, what is that? What is contactless delivery? And this was based on the premise that customers were seeking trust and they were looking for brands which were able to operate at a heightened level of hygiene and safety. So contactless delivery is simply a way in which when you place an order for a pizza or for a food service, in our case pizzas, you have the team member ride up, gives you a prompt before they turn up at your door digitally, which is either some sort of a text or a message or a push which says, I'm arriving. Of course, in many parts of the world, we have rider tracking, so you know that the tracking is arriving and you get a prompt. And prior to them ringing the bell, they would put a little stool 6 feet away from your door. They would sanitize it, place the pizza on top of it, step back 6 feet, and give you the final prompt that you open the door and pick up your pizza. And they pick up the stool, sanitize it again, and take it away. This is the most sort of basic form of contactless delivery. Now, when we got this idea coming out of China and Asian markets, we said, hey, this is great. Now, in the usual course of events, if we were not in the COVID pandemic, we would have said, hey, that's a nice idea. Let's study it for 6 months. Let's assign a team. Let's put up a proposal. Let's assign executives to look at it. Let's run a pilot for 12 months and let's talk in a year. We didn't have time for that. So we took this idea of contactless and we rolled it out across 100 countries in less than 2 months. And that was done through technology, through our people, and of course through the fact that we had an idea whose time had come. And I think that's and when I talk about pizzas, people, and technology, this is an example of where people and technology came together. So we had a growth mindset to take this really quickly, and we had the enabling technology which we could roll out. Today, contactless delivery is par for the course. You expect it from any food services provider, but this is something which we learned through our agility on this, and we feel pretty good about that.
I bet you do. To roll out that kind of change in business in 100 countries within 2 months, that is at an impressive speed, Vipul. And we're talking technology here. What technology did you invest in? What
Yeah,
was
so
it
we
that,
did.
how did you do it? Because there's so much technology out there, isn't it? And if you're
Yeah,
not a
no,
total.
sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry, please go ahead.
Oh no, no, but with there's an abundance of technology that we're seeing. This rapid digitization that we're moving towards, especially here in Asia. Where did you start when you had to pivot so quickly in adopting new technology? How did you know where to go?
Well, that's a great question. So we have been investing in this trend and learning through this technology for a few years now. And as part of this program, we set up an internal division and team called the Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, based out of the UK. It has teams in UK, in the US, and in Vietnam. And these teams have been working on technologies which make the entire customer experience frictionless and, of course, contactless more recently. Looking at every element, every touch point. So, how do you interact with the brand? How do you scroll the menus? How do you order? How do you track? How do you deliver? And then post ordering, what's the experience and how do you give us feedback? We've been able to digitize this across the world over the last few years. And so we've got some very clear standards and templates which we can then plug into every time we want to roll out a new experience. Now, because we had laid out the backbone of this for the last few years, we were able to roll out contactless as a platform through this backbone quite quickly. And I talked about contactless delivery, but there are others like contactless curbside or contactless even dine-in, where you don't need a physical menu. You can scan the QR code and get access to the menu. But the reason this works is because we have a digital backbone that we've been investing in for a few years, which allowed us to get ready for this.
I see. Are we going to be seeing pizzas delivered by drones soon?
That's a great question. We are about to test drone delivery, or we may have already tested it, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Israel. So yeah, we might. Of course, drone delivery has we got to work through a whole series of enabling technologies which keeps it safe, and then it also works with zoning in the cities, and there are so many other local permissions need to be got. But the technology is out there and it is available.
I know. My parents would go, "What, pizza falling from the sky?" But when you're looking at an older generation, my parents are in their 80s. They can't turn on their mobile phones. So how difficult was it for your customers, the older generation of customers? And it's a is it a worry that businesses have of leaving those people behind because we're accelerating so quickly to a digitalized world?
That's a great question. And in fact, I wanted to point to an example in an Asian market because then hopefully some of the audience may relate to that. As you know, Japan has an aging population. And as you know, a third of the Japanese population is now over the age of 65, right? So that's an age, and they're obviously great people, but it's an aging population. All the technologies I talked about a few minutes ago, contactless, the aspects of digitizing our entire pizza ordering experience, etc. But I'll give you a number. In Japan, our online business as a percentage of our total business, so 80% of our business is now online. So Japan, which was an analog market not long ago, where most of our uh, customer communication happened using leaflets, physical leaflets, which you distribute home to home and put it in the newspaper, etc. 80% of our business as of last month in Japan is now online. So we are an online retailer in one of the more aging populations of the world, which tells us that customers are also very agile in the way in which they adapt to the changing situation. Because you would not have expected that.
I certainly didn't expect that, and I'm encouraged by it. I know that my parents certainly wouldn't be able to order a pizza. To get on FaceTime with them is tricky enough because I'm generally looking at the ceiling of their house rather than them. But it is surprising though that they do. So you obviously work very hard on that technology to make it as simple as possible so more could access it. And could you give us some examples of, you're talking about an aging population, Japan as one country. Was the app particularly successful? What was it that worked for you?
Yeah, of course, the app is the front end of this. It is like the storefront as you see it, and the app needs to be easy to download and easy to be able to interact with. And there are some very simple and easy rules around. You should have no more than X number of clicks from the time you start navigating the app to the time you are able to place the order and check out and make payment. And the easier the better, the simpler the menu the better, the easier the font. So there is some very basic sort of consumer understanding there, of course powered by some technology which makes it all seem and feel seamless. All of this as a backbone is available, and the technology that I talk about that we rolled out in Japan was actually created for us in the UK. So it was easy for us to lift and shift the PHDV technology that I referred to and transfer it to Japan. There, I think we spent a significant amount of time with obviously with Japanese translations because that took some doing. But the enabling technology, which was around having minimal number of clicks for us to be able to navigate the menu, place the order, make the payment. Japan, for example, has Apple Pay, so even payment is cashless and contactless. And then the other aspects of tracking the delivery and making sure that you know when your pizza is about to arrive. are all enabling technologies that are available for our businesses in Japan and so many other parts of the world. The other thing around food, and you know this, is that you need to be ready for it for when it arrives. You don't want to be in the shower, you don't want to have gone out for a walk, etc. So if you're able to track it, then you are ready for it, and you can get yourself and your kids and your family prepped for the arrival of that hot, delicious pizza. And some of these tracking technologies make it much easier to do that.
Yes, you can see your food coming towards you. Yes, you're
And,
salivating at
and
the
smell
prospect of.
it.
Now, but with I know that technology is making our lives easier, but last year $1 trillion was lost in cyber fraud. Did you run into any problems with technology?
So obviously, cyber fraud and any form of data security is something which is absolutely on top of our mind. And even prior to last year, we've kept that high up on our agenda. It's right up there because we don't want to be obviously caught on the back foot on this. So we use again the we think the best global standards in terms of making sure that our customer data and our technologies are appropriately firewalled and safe. We did not run into any such issue or significant issue during the course of last year. And the reason why that's important to understand is that as we entered last year, digital as a percentage of our total business was a fifth of our total business. So 20% of our total business was digital. As of now, about half our total business is digital. So we have seen a very significant shift in the contribution of digital in our business, and we've been able to scale it with speed while keeping, the data technology safe and robust. So we would like to believe that the investments we made even prior to last year have helped us scale it because otherwise we would have stumbled and struggled.
Gosh, that's an astounding figure, Vipul, isn't it? To think that it doubled. So, what was that? Was it hovering about 25% and it doubled to over 50?
Exactly, exactly right. It was 20% and it's now almost, well, yeah, 50. That's half our business in total, which is quite a significant. You would not imagine that the Pizza Hut restaurant that you would have visited in the red roofs and the red booths is now a digital brand. You would not have imagined that.
No, I bet if you was there January talking with your team and somebody predicted that, you might well have told them to go and work somewhere else for being for being a lunatic. But they would have been spot on. And is this going to continue? I'm going to tap into 2021 in about 5 minutes or so. But do you see that growth continuing at this type of trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I referred a few minutes ago to the Japanese market where the online business is now almost 80% of our total business. Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, all of these markets, the online component of our total business is somewhere between 65 to 70% and continuing to climb rapidly. The reason it's climbing so rapidly is because of what we call the three Ds, which is digital, data, and delivery. And that's one of the industry standards that's on this slide. So as customers become far more digital savvy, as data is far more easily available for us to be able to respond and sometimes even proactively uh, deal with customer and anticipate customer needs. And of course, the fact that delivery is now becoming central to the fast casual dining industry, all of these aspects are, I think, driving a very significant growth in the digital and online contribution, even of the fast casual industry, which again is something many of us would not have imagined that this was even possible. But this trend is not just a new trend. This trend is upon us and is now becoming the mainstay of our brands and our business as we go forward. So yes, I gave you a longish answer, but yes, I expect this trend to continue despite the fact that we may be starting to see the tail end of the current crisis, but I expect the trend to continue for sure.
Yeah. Oh God, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? This year, just when we think we're over the worst of it, we have got a vaccine that is going to be rolled out. It's interesting to see how that's being rolled out in different countries. Now, you talk about your customers, core of your business, and Vipul. It was I was amazed to hear about the take up of, in Japan, how many consumers you have online. We talk about the online consumption here in Asia. Why is it, do you think, that Asia has embraced e-commerce so much more than a superpower like America, where you live?
It's a great question. I think, well, I give you my own hypothesis of this, and we can then have a debate. We can have a discussion on it. I'd love to hear your views too. I think in general, while of course I refer to the Japanese example with an aging population, but in general, Asia is younger. The
Mm.
average age in so many Asian countries, whether you take Philippines, India, Vietnam, uh, the number of the population below the age of 30 or 35 is quite significant, and it's continuing to grow. Indonesia, Malaysia, and so many others. So one, it is just a younger demographic, and that of course
Mhm.
makes it much easier to adopt and use digital as a storefront or digital as a device for you to interact with your brands. I think the second is that it is far more democratically available today than it was a few years ago. And the investments that we have seen around bandwidths and the availability of 3Gs, 4Gs, etc. And by the way, many of those innovations are starting in Asia. They're not necessarily starting in the West. So the aspect of bandwidth and so on is starting there. And I think some of the backbone that the countries are laying are making it easier for a younger population to then start playing with these technologies and then using them with a lot of speed, and therefore seeing the magic and seeing the wonder of interacting with brands. So if you couple three things, you couple the fact that there is a backbone of technology that is new, not old, so that the technology is new. Second, you've got a younger population, and
Mhm.
third is they are oftentimes interacting with brands and categories for the first time in their lives. When you put all of that together, it is quite magical. It is not surprising, therefore, that some of these markets are growing so fast.
Yeah, there's not that cynicism, is there, that can be in other countries? That, oh, I'm not sure about this, somewhat resistant to change. Asia embraces change.
It does. Asia does have a tendency to embrace change and embrace it with a sense of optimism. And I remember the optimism of Asia even now when I talk to my friends in the Asian businesses, and there is still a huge level of optimism, which is what makes Asia so truly distinctive. And some of my friends in Asia used to often say, "Asia, this is our time," right? So
Mm.
it is truly our time.
Now, what have you learned? I know we talked about, you said that you were, it's been a humbling experience, but as a leader, what have you learned over the last 12 months that has surprised you?
Sure, I'd love to if maybe if we can move to the slides on safety, connection, and equity, and I maybe talk a little bit about that in a moment. But uh, as a just as a human being, regardless of the role that we do, the first thing that I've clearly seen is that the importance of trust, which was an underlying human need and underlying human sentiment, has risen to the top, and it is expressed through safety and hygienic practices. And I'll give you one example on the next slide, which is what we call in our business trust in every bite. And what we are saying is that, and this is an example from the Middle East where we serve the San Francisco style pizza. But basically, what we're saying is simple practice of sealed in the hut and opened only by you. That coupled with the contactless delivery, delivering trust in every bite, is something that I've realized how important trust is as a sentiment in everything that we do and in our brands, expressed of course in our category through safety. So that's one of the things that I've certainly learned, and I think that's one of the changes that's going to be enduring. The second is all about what we call humanizing technology. I gave you the example of contactless delivery. I want to talk to you here about the concept of making the entire experience frictionless for our team member. And let me describe this. We run, well, thousands of restaurants across the world. As you can imagine, we have hundreds of thousands of employees and team members. But the customer expects the Hawaiian pizza to look and feel identical, whether you buy it in Singapore or Hong Kong or Japan or London or Dubai or Johannesburg. How does that happen? How does
I
that
want
happen?
to know
Because
this.
because it's if you go anywhere, you if you order a pizza at Hawaiian or a pizza at pepperoni pizza, you should be getting a certain pizza with a certain amount of cheese, with a certain amount of sauce, with X pieces of pepperoni, and so on and so forth. How does it? It happens through what we call brand standards. Now, these brand standards have happened through analog training. Like we have our store managers who are looked after by area coaches, etc., who walk around the stores, visit a store every week or 2 weeks, and train people or point out, hey, listen, you could be better here or there. Now, during pandemic, we found that things that we were taking for granted, like travel from place A to place B, became difficult. So, what we created was what we call an area coach in your pocket. So this basically is a technology what we call Hotbot and Coach 360, which allows a team member to have somebody present with him or her all the time saying, listen, I think you need to decrease your rack time to 3 minutes, or you need to get ready to dispatch because orders are building up, and so on and so forth. Now, I know this is very specific to our business and our category, but all of this enabling technology is now possible because you have a whole series of technologies in the store. They're talking to each other and then giving it back to our team members on their phone. A simple act of cleaning an oven, which is important in our business. So disassembling the oven and bringing it back, as you can imagine, is quite a task, right? It requires expertise and it requires a few people to train you. Using this device and using the camera and using I was able to assemble an oven in my Dallas test kitchen without anybody helping me. And I guess if I could do it using Hotbot and Coach 360, then a trained, restaurant manager could do it a whole lot better. So we're using these technologies to make our team member experience frictionless, which then, of course, can translate into a frictionless customer experience. Because some of these technologies allow us to not just track our riders or allocate rider resources, but also manage the back of house, manage the kitchen. I'll give you an example. If a customer places an order and we know the customer is driving towards us and the customer says, I'm going to be there in 10 minutes, we know that exactly 8 minutes from the time the customer should roll up to our store, we pop the pizza in the oven because takes about 7 minutes to cook, right? And then takes a few seconds to pack. But by the time the customer rolls up, you have piping hot pizza, duly cut, duly packed, duly racked, ready for them. Now, this is possible because of technologies that we have, like Dragontail, which help us put all this together. They help us allocate resources in the store. They tell us when to put the pizza in the oven. They tell us when to cut it and rack it, when to keep it in the heating pouch, when to pull it out and hand it over to the customer. And if it's a delivery order, it tracks the riders. And if 3 riders are out, it allocates the resources between riders to say, listen, you need to have one more drop off before you come back, or come back now because we have more orders ready for you. I know this sounded a bit technical for something as simple and democratic as a pizza, but this is how we're trying to humanize our technology.
Well, and I think you're enlightening the audience. This is something we most probably never thought of before. Certainly not me, but I'm finding it fascinating as my nerdy pizza coming out here.
So that's the second. And the third, of course, is something which is very humbling, which is equity. What the global pandemic has done during the course of last year is highlighted the growing disparities between health, education, and work. I think we've all realized that all of us don't necessarily have the same access to resources, whether it's healthcare, employment, employability, training, and opportunities. And so we thought long and hard about what is it that we can do to make a dent in the universe. What is our play? How can we contribute here? And if you go back to what we do, which is pizzas, we know that when you cut a pizza and you cut it properly, you can get an equal slice for everyone. And so, in the way in which we've called out our purpose, we've said our purpose is really all about providing an equal slice for everyone. What does that mean? It means we want to provide not just employment, because for every store we open, we provide employment to 20, 30, 40 people, but we also want to provide employability. We want to make it equal and provide equity for our for people in any part of the world. And I'm going to give you an example here from Sri Lanka, where in Sri Lanka we have a program which helps as new people come into our business, as we train them, we don't just employ them, we also teach them life skills around employability, including things like heart styles, which allows you to dip into your strengths and recognize your weaknesses. Of course, training, processes, discipline, and so on and so forth. And then we take it a step forward. We have stores in Sri Lanka and in India which are employed by the less abled. So imagine walking into a store where the entire store team is differently abled. They can they can't hear you or they can't talk. So we've got stores which are completely employed by such teams. And here's the interesting part: they have the highest customer satisfaction metrics in the regions in which they operate, which is really gladdens my heart. So I'm super excited and humbled about these three aspects, about humanizing technology, about equity, and of course making sure that we have an equal slice for everyone. So I feel that these three trends, which is safety, humanizing technology, and equity, are things that are going to stay with us as we go forward. These are parts of the punctuational change that I talked about.
Oh, that's incredibly heartwarming, and it's wonderful to hear, especially when you operate in so many diverse different countries and different cultures. You mentioned over 100 different countries, and to bring that humanization in. And what's so pleasing is that you say that customer satisfaction is high. That's a good news story. I'm very happy to hear that. Now, Vipul, there is a Winston Churchill quote, which is, "When you're going through hell, keep going." We've all been through our own little pieces of hell over the last year, and audience that joins us today might well be nodding in agreement. We've got to keep soldiering on. With a man with your amount of experience and with our audience that do join us, what advice do you have for them as we navigate our way through these choppy waters of 2021? What would you say?
Thank you. Firstly, I'm humbled that that I'm here and I'm talking to you, and I learn every day. So I will just humbly and respectfully share with you some thoughts that kept me going during the last year or so, and a few things I may have learned. If some of that applies to the audience, that's great. I'll dip a little bit into my own culture, and in the Hindu culture, we do say that you you cannot choose your circumstances. You can choose how you respond to your circumstances. And last year was a lot about just choosing how you respond to your circumstances. What kept me going was the fact that we have a culture and a team across the world where we work with each other, we build each other up, we support each other, and therefore just dipping into the culture, the people aspect of the business was very central. And just as I say, we look after our people, they look after our customers, business takes care of itself, but somebody's looking after me too in my own organizational totem pole. And therefore, people and culture really helped me respond to my circumstances. Training, training around resilience and training around what we internally call growth mindset. You can often approach issues with a fixed mindset, which is, I don't know how to do it and it can't be done, or a growth mindset, which is, I don't know how to do it yet. So the answer is not yet. I'll figure something out. And the difference between I can't do it versus I can't do it yet is growth mindset. And I think the aspect of growth mindset, which is something we teach and we are taught, in our business, and we teach it to our team members across the world, was something that kind of helped us. So dipping into people, culture, and the resilience and growth mindset was something that certainly helped me and my team get through what we know was a challenging year and what might continue to be challenging for some more time because we're not out of it yet. And I think that's if there was one piece of advice from a personal standpoint, I'd love to, and I'd like to be able to share that. It is also clear to me that the changes that we have seen during the course of last year are such that we will have to rely on enabling technologies, wherever they may come from, to make our customer experience easier. And I want to talk about technology in the context of ease. As brand builders and marketers and business people, we spend a lifetime making things better, right? Better
Hmm.
sometimes is a euphemism for more complex. But we have realized in the last couple of years, and certainly through COVID, that customers want an easier experience. Easy beats better. And what we have, if there's one thing COVID has taught us, is easy beats better, regardless of the category that you operate in. Make it easier, make it frictionless, and customers will reward us and reward the experiences. So those are some of my reflections for the course of last year. But I think we're still learning. We're not out of the woods yet. We're still learning, and as a student of this subject, I'm going to keep doing that in the years to come.
Gosh, what good advice. I love what you say there, that easier beats better. Sometimes we try to be impressive more than we try to be understood. I think we can all fall into that trap at times. And from my line of work, there's a great quote that I like. I'm a broadcaster and a communications coach. And there's a Mark Twain quote, which is, "Sorry, I wrote you a long letter. I didn't have time to write you a short one."
Yes.
And getting to simple is really quite hard. And I think
Indeed.
people
Indeed. You're
underestimate
so,
how difficult that can be.
you're so right. And that's such a wonderful quote. I mean, that Mark Twain quote is famous and it is so relevant for today's times.
He really is, yes, simple, but never underestimate how difficult it is getting to simple. Vipul, I know how hard you have worked over the last 12 months. I know you're a proud member of the American Chamber, and what a pleasure it's been to sit down and have this conversation with you this morning. You're in Dallas, I'm in Singapore, but thank you for enlightening us on what's been happening with Pizza Hut and what it means here in Asia, and that we can look forward to 2021. It's not going to be plain sailing, but there is a lot that we can focus on, and that's what I really picked up from what you were talking about, is to stay focused, to make it simple, and to believe in your teams and to believe in the people around you.
Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Have really enjoyed this conversation, and like all of these interactions, I've learned a ton. I'm very Asian, as you can see. My heart is still in Asia. I've been a member of the AmCham for a long time. I have so many friends in Asia. Uh, Please look after yourselves. We're going to get through this year too, and I am looking forward to that time when we can see each other at closer proximity when life permits us, and perhaps we can have a slice of pizza together.
I look forward to that, and clearly it's a Hawaiian pizza in this part of the world. That's the one that rules, as you say. Vipul, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye bye.